Hey guys, Elizabeth Paratina here. Welcome to the video Ghost Stories. So now, last time I read in the night about a guy who was a child, can't get enough sleep, and now this one, I think it's different. I'm not sure. It's called The Other Room. So let's get to it. After writing my account of an horrific experience I had as an 8-year-old child. Many have encouraged me to speak about the aftermath. I've been hesitant to do so as I felt unsettled since I broke my silence. Sleep has not come easy to me these last few nights. My skepticism, however, remains resilient, and as such, I will tell of what I experienced in the other room. This won't be as long as what required, only what took place over a few days, but that was more than enough for me. If you recall, after that unwelcome nightly visitor left me, I was moved into another bedroom a year later. This room was much larger than the previous one and had a warm and welcoming atmosphere to it. Some places felt bad. The room before felt full, but this one did not. Thankfully, I was given a normal bed. The previous one was taken apart and thrown out. A welcome sight, I might add. I love my new room. I enjoy the space for all of my toys. I was happy that the place was large enough to have my friends drop by. But most of all, I was relieved to be be out of that uneasy, foreboding part of the house. On the first night, I slept more soundly than I had done for a long time. Of course, I still moved my bed several feet from the wall. I told my mother that I and my friends liked to use the gap between that bed and wall as a hiding place when we were playing. I awoke the next day feeling refreshed and relaxed. As I lay there watching some of my favorite cartoons on a small portable television, I noticed something odd. An old dark brown armchair, which had always been there, sat at the foot of my bed, large and looming. It was frayed and worn, having been given to us as part of a suite by my cousin, but it had been used many times even by then. The chair itself was not unusual, but what was unsettling me was that I could have sworn that before I had went to sleep, the chair had been facing away from the bed. But now in the cold light of day, the chair was facing me. I assumed one of my parents moved it while I slept, probably looking for something which had been left there before we switched rooms. The second night was not as restful. It was around 11 p.m. and I could hear my parents' television from from the other side of the house. The room was largely in darkness, the only illumination an orange hue drifting through my window from the streetlights outside. I think it meant the car lights? Question mark, I don't know. I lay there content until I heard something quiet yet unmistakable. At first, I thought it was the sound of my own breath exhaling and inhaling as I rest, but when I stopped for a moment, the quiet, almost inaudible sound of someone else in the room breathing in and out did not cease. It continued rhythmically and without pause. I lay there I lay there in the darkness, but while I was still recovering from the terror instilled in me from my experience in my previous bedroom, I was not entirely afraid. Okay, it's the same guy, never mind. The breathing was so distant and unlike the whistling I had heard during my encounter with that thing in the wall. That I remained calm, and even at that early age, I believed that it was so stupid. But that it was probably my imagination playing tricks on me. Still had no chance. I stepped out of bed, walked across the room, and turned the light on. The sound had gone. I stared at that old worn armchair facing the foot of my bed, which was within reaching distance of where I slept, and I turned around to face the other way. I had no real reason to do so, but something about it sitting there filled me with dread. The third night, I was not so fearless. Again, I awoke in darkness. Lying on my back, I stared at the ceiling, which seemed to happily absorb the dim orange light from the street. The tree outside my window swayed in a calm breeze, casting a strange collection of improbable, moving shadows across the room. I could hear nothing but the long and distant hum of the city's night traffic. Just as I began to drift back into sleep, I heard it. A creak from the bottom of my bed, as if something had moved or shifted its weight on the floor. I raised my head, peering through the darkness, but saw nothing strange. Everything sat as it had done throughout the day. Nothing was out of place. I cast my gaze across the room. Some comics on the floor, a few boxes. Sorry, get rid of that. I hate when it does that. Yeah. Okay, what was I? Oh, yeah. A few boxes which had still to be unpacked. The armchair, unmoved, still facing away from the bottom of my bed. There was nothing sinister here. I was now fully awake, glazing over at my television, considering whether or not to enjoy some late-night TV. Although I have to keep the volume low, of course, as my older brother would hear into the next room, and no doubt tell me to switch it off. Just as I sat fully in bed, I heard it again, a low creak, accompanied by a sound. The sound the slightest of movements. I looked again at the room. The dim orange shadows cast by the leaves hanging by my window now took on a more menacing form. I still saw no reason to be afraid. I stared at the chair at the end of my bed and saw nothing unusual about it. It's quite common for the mind to take a moment to fully come to terms with what it is seeing. It takes time to put the full horror of what is in front of you together into a moment of cold, bitter realization. Yes, I was staring at that old, worn armchair in the dark, but what I also staring at was the person singing it. In the dim light, I could only see the outline of the back of his head, the rest obscured by the spine of the chair. I sat motionless, staring, praying, hoping that my eyes were being misled by their surroundings. The slow creak of movement as it shifted in its battered throne chilled me to my very core. There was no mere trick of the dark. Then it shifted onto its right side. I knew what it was doing. It was turning to look at me. It was difficult to make out, for even in that room, it seemed darker than everything around it. I saw what looked like a collection of long finger slips over the crest of the chair, and then another. The room was silent, but for the sound of this thing shuffling in its seat, and the crash was racing my heart. At first, I could only make out the outline of its forehead, but then it began to rise up, revealing two pinpoints of light in the dark, rising of its deeply set eye socket. It was staring at me. I screamed, and within a moment my brother and mother came into the room, straight to the lion, asking if I had another bad dream. I sat speechless, barely acknowledged them, staring intently at the now empty armchair. I was only in that room for another few days before we suddenly moved. I saw nothing for the remaining night, except for my last sleep in that room where I woke to the warm air of something breathing to my ear. I turned out of bed, turning the light on. The slow within breath of something unseen remained louder than before. I spent the rest of that night on the couch in the living room. 2 years later, I slept soundly in my bed in our new house. There had been no other incidents, and I was sure I had left behind whatever strangeness had plagued me in that little Avenge suburban home. I was, however, left one parting gift: my tormentors, and in my opinion, the watcher in that armchair was a different entity to the thing in the isolated room. I had one last surprise in store for me, like an animal claiming its territory. I was not entirely out with their grasp. For one last, terrifying moment, I felt the presence of those things. I lay there sound asleep. 2 years since those horrifying experiences. I was in the throes of a nightmare, and suddenly happily found myself awake, safe and sound in my bed. The room was darker than usual. I breathed a sigh of relief, as one does when waking from a nightmare, but the room was so dark. I could see nothing at all, as if something was snuffled out the light. I chuckled to myself, realizing that I must have pulled my blanket up and over my face while sleeping. The cotton blanket felt cool against me, but the air was a little too warm, almost stifling. Just as I was about to remove the blanket for some air, I heard it. For the last time, I heard it. The rhythmic breathing of the watcher at the end of my bed. Fear gripped me, followed by anger and despair. Why could I not be left alone? I then did something most particular. I decided to speak to it. Perhaps this thing did not mean to harm me. Perhaps it wasn't aware of the terror it had caused. Surely a young boy deserves some mercy. As the breathing grew louder and closer, I began to cry. I could feel his presence on the other side of the blanket, his breath hanging over me like a stanage wind. Through the tears, I uttered 2 words, words which truly will put an end to all of this. Please stop. The breathing began to change. It became more animated, quicker somehow. I could hear something shuffling next to me, standing close by. The breathing then moved, first back to the foot of my bed, and then slowly across the room, through the door, into the hallway, and then gone. Half crying, half elate, I lay in the still darkness, my face still covered by the blanket. You may consider this a victory of some sort. But I do not. If those things were real, I know now beyond a shadow of a doubt in their intentions were not misconstrued. They were twisted, filled with malice. I would normally never use such a word to describe anything, but is as close to evil as I hope I ever come. How do I know that? I'll tell you how. Moments after that, things seemed to have left the house. Something pressed forcefully down on top of me, pushing the blanket with against my strength, against my face. I could feel a large hand with long, thin fingers wrapping my covers around my skull. Its nails imprinted upon me like razor-sharp wrenches. I managed to slide down into the gap between the bed and the wall, quickly making my escape, clambering and screaming out of my room, waking my family. Make no mistake, that thing in the darkness tried to smother me to death. Okay, that was terrifying like the other room. Next one is my fears released and the other thing. So I think I should leave it here. So thank you so much for watching. Give me the thumbs up if you like it. Comment down below if you want to see it next. Let me know. And press the subscribe button and hit the bell notification on if you enjoyed this video. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.